And we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to A Bookish Moment. I'm Sarah Burr.
I am JC Kenny. And Sarah, it is so much fun to have a fabulous guest here, a friend of the show, an amazing writer. And, you know, hey, if you're looking to buy a house, she can probably hook you up with that too. Sarah, I think it's time to get bookish.
Yes, our wonderful audience members will probably recognize our dear friend Judy L. Murray, who is returning to A Bookish Moment to talk revenge and real estate, murder and mayhem, all of that good stuff. Judy, it is wonderful to see you back here. Congratulations on your brand new release, Villain in the Vineyard, which is book 4 in your Chesapeake Bay mysteries. Yeah, that's we've got a lot of adventures about Helen Morrisey to catch up on. But welcome to A Bookish Moment.
Thank you very much. I am thrilled to be here. You always have a phenomenal group of people attending. And, you know, the questions you put at all of the authors is always challenging. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you very, very much.
Well, you're very welcome. We like to keep folks on their toes. I know that we all spend a lot of brain power trying to come up with our stories, but we like to keep folks working a little bit harder. We do have some of our viewers chiming in. Farmhouse Reader saying hello all. DHB saying good afternoon. Thank you guys for joining us. If you have questions about mysteries, murder, or real estate that you'd like to ask Judy, make sure that you pop them in the chat. Judy, if you can kind of bring our audience members up to speed, because I think the last time that you were here, you were talking about Killer in the Kitchen. I don't think we got to connect about Peril in the Pool House, which again, These titles are so much fun to say because I love a good alliteration. Our audience knows how much I love a good title. Tell us, how has Helen been holding up in Port Anne, Maryland, and what's in store for her in Villain in the Vineyard?
Well, thank you very, very much. And thank you all for listening in. The first one, as you know, was Murder in the Master, which introduced Helen Morrisey, who is a real estate agent, very experienced, very professional. And she works in a small Chesapeake Bay town called Port Anne. And she accidentally falls into solving a murder in order to prevent a friend from going to jail, frankly. She was accused of murdering this local builder who turns out to be a bit of a, not a good guy. So anyway, that was Murder in the Master. The second one where we got together was Killer in the Kitchen. And that was about Helen, who was given the opportunity to work for a celebrity chef, much like a Gordon Ramsay. And he had a live TV show, cooking show, and she was introduced to him through her daughter, Lizzie. And she goes over to that cooking show to meet him for a second time to put his property on the market. And she literally watches him. This is not a spoiler alert. You know it very early on that she watches him die on air, which is really a fun storyline to write because I had to have the readers read about it, see it happening, but not know how it happened. So Peril in the Pool House was about a young couple who she sells a big old Victorian on the water in Port Anne, and they decide that they're going to turn into a B&B while he's running for a local office. And the night of the big grand opening, someone is killed in the pool house. So that was number 3. Yeah. Villain in the Vineyard actually is really fun. I do a lot of listening to what readers like as far as room locations and types of buildings and things like that. And I had a lot of feedback saying, what about in a vineyard? So it must be all the book clubs. I do a lot of Zoom calls and I attend a lot of book clubs in person because I just love it. There's so much fun about seeing people in person but even if it's just Zoom and talking about a storyline and our characters. So Villain in the Vineyard idea concept was suggested by a couple book clubs, and I thought,
Oh,
that's
cool.
not a bad one. Yeah. Unfortunately for me, I live on a cliff at the very top of the Chesapeake Bay, and which is fashioned after where Helen lives, or maybe she's fashioned after where I live. But there is right down the road from us a beautiful vineyard right on the Elk River, which attaches to the Chesapeake. And we find out very quickly that the owner of this vineyard, well, what can I say? He doesn't have a very good day. There's a day that's not exactly what you'd want. So, but anyway, and it's interesting to say that about her as a real estate agent, because what I love about that, well, first of all, I have 35 years in the business experience, so I've heard it all, and I get lots and lots of storyline ideas because of what really happens in the business. But along with that, it is really fun, and I think very believable. The people who read my books like what she does as a job, because real estate agents really do see people from the inside out. They look in your medicine cabinet, they know what you're taking, they know that you hide, you stash chocolate underneath your pillow at night. They know when you have marital disputes. They know a lot of things about you. They know about your finances and whether you're in good shape or you're not in such great shape. They know a lot about you personally, and it leads to knowing things that sometimes either the client or the outside world shouldn't know. So it gives me lots and lots of material. So Villain in the Vineyard is about a man who owns this very well-known Maryland vineyard, and he very shortly, reaches his demise.
He doesn't own it anymore.
It wouldn't be a murder mystery without somebody getting killed. So,
exactly. And if you read my stories, you know that my stories, they happen very quickly. You're sort of right out of the box within a chapter, maybe a chapter and a half or two, something serious happens. I tend to like to really get going right away on where the storyline's going.
Go ahead,
Judy,
Jim.
I was just going to say, because we've got a listener, DHB. Hey, DHB, love you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. DHB chimed in with living on a cliff, ? Do you ever worry about the house sliding into the bay?
That's a really great question. Well, the plus is I'll never suffer from flooding, okay? Because my house is here and the bay is here, and we look way down about 100 steps worth. So, wow. Yeah, exactly. So it's a beautiful view, but it's a long walk down. And I don't have to worry about flooding, I'll put it that way. On the other hand, a day like today, I'm looking right out right now, and it is blowing. It is blowing. So if anyone listening in hasn't been to the Chesapeake, this time of year, it definitely, it can blow. And it's a beautiful place to visit. Yeah.
And it's certainly a beautiful place to read about, because your books are so atmospheric about setting the scene for us and making us feel like we are home in Port Anne. And I feel like, Judy, I remember the last time that you were here, that vineyard that you had mentioned that you were like getting ready to do an event there. I feel like, or like some type of like book talk, and
not at the vineyard, although I did post something on my website where it shows me at that vineyard about a year ago. It was freezing cold. It was like February, but I was checking it out because I was thinking of making that my location. But as you writers know, you also tweak it. For example, this particular story, my first three were always in warmish weather, whether it was spring, summer, or fall. And then this one, I deliberately chose February, and it's freezing cold, and she's visiting this vineyard, and the snow is there, and she's dealing with the ruts through the woods and all that kind of thing. But I love doing that because it gave the whole setting a different tone. She's kicking off the snow off her boots, and all that kind of thing, and it gave it a different a different setting, and yet it's still poured in.
Mhm.
So yes, yeah. But I do have. It's funny you mentioned that because I have a big event to launch a launch party plan by a very enthusiastic book club actually at this particular vineyard.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I had to do a lot of research on vineyards.
Well,
Yeah, yeah. The vineyard owner is supposed to be from France, and I had to figure out the regions in France and here, and how realistic. People don't necessarily think of Maryland as being a place. You know, obviously you think of California as having wineries, but actually I found out that there's about 800 locations.
Oh, wow.
Along the Chesapeake. So which is kind of a surprise. Yeah.
I was going to ask about, one of my questions was, did you uncover any like fascinating wine facts while you were researching this book? And it sounds like the fact that there's like a ton of wineries around the area is one of them.
Well, that's true. Well, Helen, if you've read the books, you know that her favorite white wine is New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. That's her favorite wine. However, what's interesting, actually, I had come across a storyline, which is a true story. And I usually, whether it's real estate related or in some way, I incorporate a true crime background into my books. And this book here is also tied into a true crime.
Oh.
So, yeah, and I use it as sort of the basis of why this all happens. I'll put it that way. And so yeah, so it's funny about vineyards. I mean, they do give you lots of material to work with, and I can always, I can practice by trying my wine as a lady.
Well, yeah, you got to make it real. Well,
Yeah.
And Judy, you mentioned book clubs, or you're doing a book club visit. I understand you do visit with a lot of book clubs, or you have done that in the past. Can you talk a little bit about that? And if if there are book club folks out there, you want to have Judy, what should they do to reach out to you?
Yeah, I thank you for asking. I love book clubs. I'm a real enthusiast as far as book clubs and face-to-face signings, because I think that there's nothing better than meeting the people that are thinking about buying your books or also have read them and come up to you and say, oh, I loved them. I have to have the next one. So that's a really, it's such a good feeling. Book clubs, I will probably travel as far as even close to 2 hours to go to a book club with a group of people, if I can make it work. And if I can't make it work, then sometimes we do Zoom calls, and we'll have them in their room wherever they like to meet, and I'll come on. Someone will put the laptop there in front of them, and we'll chit chat the whole time, and they'll ask whatever they like, and it's a lot of fun. It really is. And for me, I get a lot out of it, because not only does it make you feel as if, gee, all this work is worth it, because people enjoy your stories, right? You're the same way. And at the same time, kind of like the vineyard idea, the villain in the vineyard, you pick up ideas for the next storyline. So, yeah. I have a son who's actually in law enforcement, and he's a great consult for me, because he'll come across these storylines, and actually I used the one for Villain in the Vineyard that gave me the sort of background crime involved. And so, as you know, the people you meet, the people you know and you work and you love, they're all part of the material that you collect.
That's really cool about the true crime aspect that you use, Judy, because I remember I believe it was Murder in the Master that insulin was your weapon of choice.
Yes, it was.
And so every time I hear on a Dateline that somebody is using insulin, I'm always like, Judy wrote about that, because that was kind of one of the first times that I in my reading of Cozy Mysteries, that I had come across insulin used as the murder weapon, and I just thought that was really, really fascinating. Do you have out of the 4 books that you've written, or maybe even just like the ideas that you're kind of ruminating on in your head, what is your like preferred method of fictional murder? Is there one that you're like, ooh, I find this to be?
Well, it's when you think about it, Agatha Christie, they always comment that her favorite was poison.
Mhm.
She was all about poison. She used it a lot of times in her mysteries, right? I don't know that I have a favorite. Killer in the Kitchen was very tricky. Um, and Hell in the Pool House, that person was stabbed. So who ends up being our victim, and and this one here is not. He's yeah. It has to do with a very large bottle of wine. So,
Well,
it's not funny. Yeah.
and that's a shame that a bottle of wine ends up being going into evidence instead of folks getting to enjoy it. That's one of the big shames, besides somebody dying, of course.
That's a
Um,
very, and you know what, JC, that's a very good point, because actually it was a really good bottle of wine, and unfortunately it was left on the wine room floor.
that's a shame. So something else that I'd like to talk to you about, Judy, about this particular story. Sarah, what's it called? You can call it. You
Villain
can get
in the
name.
Vineyard.
Yes, Villain in the Vineyard. I don't have the style that Sarah does, but there's graffiti, and we're not talking
Oh,
street art.
yeah.
There's graffiti vandalism going on in this story. Can you talk a little bit about that? How that kind of adds to the kind of the setup, and why that? How did that idea come about?
Well, it's I like to know that with each story, all of the characters have certain things that happen in their back life, right? That evolve. And for Helen Morrisey, our lead character, she has to do some, I won't call it maturing because she's in her early 50s, but everybody keeps maturing. I don't care how old you are, you always learn things, you have to evolve. And what happens with her, and it is a huge part of the storyline, is that she is starting to have someone or some people who are literally assaulting her clients' houses. And they're either inside or outside. They're attacking the house by graffitiing the words, "Your agent is a crook." And so, yeah.
That's
So
mean.
all of a sudden, Helen is, her whole life is falling apart because people are starting to walk on the other side of the sidewalk. As she's walking down the street on one side, they're crossing the street to cross because she's beginning to feel like bad luck, and she's losing business. People are being intimidated. They're thinking, oh my gosh, if I put my property in the market with Helen, I might end up having my house, assaulted in some way. And we get it. That's frightening, right? So she's losing business. It's her livelihood. She spent her life building it. She's a single mom. Her husband had passed away, and she needs to make her living, right? And she has a reputation that she's always been super proud of. And all of a sudden, she is defending her reputation. So what happens, I will say, in the storyline is she's experiencing something her clients or people she's defended have experienced, which is being accused of something that you didn't do. And that's a horrible event to live through. So as a result, for her to live through that process and come out the other end and still hold up her chin, and be proud of what she's doing and try to recoup her life, right? Fight back for her life, has a lot to do with the storyline. So it's not just the murders that, she's involved with as far as solving, but also what's going on as a sideline, and a major sideline subplot, trying to figure out who was after her, trying to destroy her life. What did she do? How could she have done something that would have someone so upset with her that they wouldn't just tell her, and instead are all over town, basically pulling her life apart.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
That's a good, that is a really, it's a challenging subplot for Helen to navigate because, she's juggling just so much now at this point. So being able to kind of layer that in with the mystery, it must have been it must have kept you as the writer kind of on the edge of your seat, because there's just like, there's a lot at stake here.
Yes, there is. Exactly. It's not just her client that's injured or whatever. It's also her own life is really falling apart, in that regard. So how does she, um, stick with it? Which, by the way, as you also know, is that in my storylines, we haven't mentioned it at all, but she's an avid mystery lover. Helen is, and her house is full of mystery stories, and she has her favorites, and 5 of her favorites she has turned into sort of her mental consultants. She checks her bookcases for cases that they've solved, and for her to guide her to solving her own. And they're Nancy Drew, Jessica Fletcher from Murder, She Wrote, Jane Marple from Agatha Christie's Jane Marple, MC Beaton, the famous Scottish writer, and her protagonist is Agatha Raisin. And then you have Nora Charles from the 30s. So it's a really nice blend of personalities. And those people are like her consultants, and sometimes people are like, what? And she says, physicians have their library of materials that they consult when they're trying to figure out someone's illness. I consult these famous women sleuths to help me solve crimes. And
That's smart.
Yeah. And people seem to really, really love it, because each of these women are really so different from each other. And yet they all have the same commitment to seeing that justice is served.
Mm-hmm.
And Helen's very on board with that.
And it also makes Helen, I think, at least within the mystery community, very relatable, because we all love those sleuths, and those are the people that we love. So it's like we would definitely feel that that connection with her. I'm curious, Judy, when we back for Murder in the Master, especially when we were designing all of your promotional materials for it.
Yes, you've been amazing help.
You had your rules, your real estate rules, and I'm curious if book 4 has a rule that we learn, and if it does, can you share it with us, or do you have any anything new to share with us on the real estate front that you can tease our audience members with, because we all love HGTV to the max. So any crumbs that you can give us are always really fun.
Well, I do. The beginning of the first chapter for every book, I have a real estate rule. And the first real estate rule was, what was it? I know the second was everyone loves a drop dead kitchen. Anyway, but Villain in the Vineyard is beware a house covered in tangled vines, for they conceal deceit.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
Boy,
that's rule number 4. What?
I was to say that's not foreboding.
No, exactly. I will tell you a funny story very quickly. I know we're running down on time, but I was at a book talk for actually a corporation asked me to come to speak with their group, and there were quite a few people there. And in preparation, so many of those people that attended the event came up with their list of suggested new titles, and they were hysterical. I mean, things like, bludgeoned in the basement. I mean, people really had fun with it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hysterical to see what people come up with.
You've got a lot of possibilities there, which means you've got a lot of books that you can write. And the fact that you've mentioned vines, about, the vines covering a house, I kid you not, I'm rewatching the first season of Fixer Upper as a comfort watch right now. And there was one house that everybody was really nervous because it was covered in ivy. And they had to completely pull off the siding because the ivy had grown into the electrical wire that was in the house. So it was
Ivy's very bad for stone and brick. That's exactly right. Yeah. Is exactly right. And actually, Helen, my protagonist, excuse me, getting over a cold. She is a real rehab fanatic, which is not unlike me and my husband. We've just lived through having our floors sanded. Oh my
Ooh.
God. Let me never recommend it, you know? Yeah, yeah. But anyway, so a lot of those kind of touches are in her book. She's dating Joe McAllister, and Joe McAllister, so there's some romance that develops through the book and the local detective. And uh, you know, he said something to her, I hate women that move their furniture around, you know, that kind of thing. And she very quickly and snaps back at him and says, well, I guess we don't have a problem then, because, you know, because he's trying to hit on her and she's not showing any interest. So yeah, yeah. He's also the man who says you find bodies like cats find mice. So there's a lot of repartee, and they're going back and forth with each other, which makes it fun.
Fine. That's awesome. Well, Judy, unfortunately, what's not fun is the fact that our time is almost up. So thank you so much for hanging out with us. Villain in the Vineyard came out today on in Kindle format.
Correct.
And it's going to be available in a couple of weeks in paperback and wide release. So folks can keep tabs on you in a good way, not a creepy way. Where can people find you online, or you know, as you're celebrating the release of this wonderful book, where can people keep in touch with you?
Well, quickly, I'd suggest a couple things. If you do go on Amazon and you see the Kindle, but you want a print copy, they should be coming out in about 4 or 5 days, hopefully. But you could click the follow the author button. And that way, when it does come out, I believe Amazon automatically notifies you that it's available in print. So that might be one way. It will be on Barnes and Noble and all those other places too. And local bookstores and that kind of thing. I do a reasonable amount of book signings and all in Maryland and Pennsylvania and Delaware and Barnes and Nobles and things like that. So that's one thing to do. And also my website. My website is very simple. It's Judy L, always use the L, Judy L Murray Mysteries.com. And if you Google that, you can sign up for my newsletter, and which is fun. I don't do it so often that you get tired of me, but I keep you informed on what's happening, and you'll get a notice that way too that the books are out in print. So that's, you know, just around the corner.
Fabulous. And we will all be seeing each other at Malice Domestic, not this coming weekend, but next weekend. So it's right around the corner. Are you on a panel this year, Judy?
I am, and it should be a fun panel. I love the topic. It's called Traditional versus Cozy. You know, what's the difference between the two books? And I would probably say to you that I'm kind of a bit of a blend. I think it's a little more realistic as far as the traditional side of things, and using some real estate and some real storylines and that kind of thing in my stories. And yet I'm a great believer in that, you know, justice prevails, and you have to live. I get that from a lot of readers. They love the characters. They get very committed to them. They want to, but one of my favorite questions I get from them all the time is, what's with Helen and Joe? And I'll say, no, you just got to keep reading.
Got to keep reading.
Yeah.
Well, fabulous.
Yeah.
Judy, thank you so much. Yes, we will see you there. It's going to be a great time. Congratulations on the release of Villain in the Vineyard. Always wonderful to have another Judy L. Murray mystery out in the world. Thank you so much for being here today. And we look forward to having you back on the show, and we hopefully have more of Helen's mysteries to enjoy.
Thank you so much. It's an honor, and it's an honor for your people that are listening in.
Well, thank you. And to our wonderful audience members, we will see you at 8 p.m. on Thursday this week. We've got Josh Mendoza stopping by talking political thrillers and time traveling. It's going to be a very fun hour. So we will see you then. Until we all connect, stay bookish, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Hey, folks.
Be well.